From acting on the Broadway stage with Al Pacino and Anne Bancroft to playing Audrey Hepburn's son in a Peter Bogdanovich film to becoming a heartthrob teen idol on One Day at a Time to sitting in a pink chair on the Justin Root Show. Please welcome Glenn Scarpelli.
Hey, Justin, I'm so happy to be here.
You know how long I've been waiting for you to come on, and I hope you know how seriously excited I am about this.
And vice versa. Really, I know we tried to coordinate this a few times, so I'm so happy we're finally doing this.
I'm so excited.
Me too.
So excited. Now you are, I can't say bi-coastal because it's not a coast, but you live in Arizona, correct?
Yes.
Sedona,
Arizona. For the last 30 years, I own a local TV station out there called Sedona Now TV, and we've been on the air 22 years. And so I love my life out there, but I also love LA because they both have such a different vibe and a different pace, if you will. And coming back and forth is, for me, the best of both worlds.
You have no idea how happy that makes me because I am a very unapologetic fan of LA. I've been out here since 1995, a long time, and I have not lost my love of it. I really. But you're Staten Island.
Staten Island originally, and I was bi-coastal for a very long time in my life when I was doing One Day at a Time. You know, I was only a kid, and I'm an only child, and my parents came to LA with me to film, so we would go back and forth. I had a condo out here, which I bought, but technically you're not allowed to buy property at 14 years old, so it was with my folks. And we had the condo out here and our home in Staten Island, so I would go back and forth all the time. And I love New York, but I really love LA.
Born in New York. I know your dad was a comic illustrator. What's the proper term?
Illustrator, cartoonist.
Cartoonist.
Yes, okay. But illustrator works. And Archie Comics.
I think people have heard of that.
Yeah, they've heard of that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was interesting is when I was growing up, Dad would draw in our basement. And I just never really knew how famous those characters were because they were just the people that my dad hung out with in our basement, really. So I didn't realize that until I got older and I saw the impact that his work had on so many generations. I mean, to this day, I still hear from everybody that loved Archie Comics, so it makes me very happy.
Any acting blood, though? Any, show business people in your family?
No, not acting blood, but my dad was a creative.
Okay.
You know, so
that's where it comes from.
Yeah, and when I became interested in acting, which was really early on.
That's what. Tell me. Don't gloss. I need details.
Okay, all right.
What? Where? I mean, when did you decide?
So I was always a fan of the industry and the history of the industry prior to my birth. I always loved the history of music, the history of film, where television came from, young. And I was 5 years old, and I set foot on stage at a kindergarten play. And I just looked out in the audience and I said, "I'm home." And that's when I realized I was in love with show business and I was in love with the theater.
And you did that. What did mom and dad say?
Well, they were very supportive, and Dad, God bless him, because he was a creative himself and he worked for himself. Even though he worked for Archie Comics, he was an independent contractor. He never really wanted to be an employee. He wrote his own ticket. He was in control of his life. And so he was never the guy that was like, get a real job, which I hear so often from young actors whose parents don't support them. So my dad was really one that was very into, he's creative. He found a creativity.
You never find a dad being that one. I mean, you do, but that is very rare to have your dad push your creative juices. That's not.
And he loved film. He actually wrote a film with Tanya Roberts was the star.
Nancy Allen.
And Nancy Allen. This guy does his homework.
A boy named Glenn Scarpelli.
Yes.
So
yes.
That was your first movie, and Tanya Roberts.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Michael Tucci from Grease was also in that film.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know how you'd have any memory of that, but do you remember it?
Yes.
Really?
Oh my gosh, because it was so exciting to be in front of a camera for the first time, and absolutely. Michael Tucci and I are still friends, actually, all these years later.
That's amazing.
We spoke just recently.
And what did that lead to? Because then I know you did you were in a TV movie that I believe Gwyneth Paltrow's or pilot. Actually,
Pilot.
that Bruce Paltrow directed, right?
Yes, produced, I believe.
Produced, okay.
Yeah, and it starred Ethel Merman,
I mean,
which was quite an experience. That was one of the first gigs that I really got, that I auditioned for.
did you do your
Oh yeah, because that was the first time I was ever on a sitcom. It was a sitcom pilot. I only had one scene, but it was a really good scene, and it was with Ethel Merman, and we're sitting around one day, and she says, "So kid, did you ever see a Broadway show?" That's my Ethel Merman impersonation. So I don't know. I mean, I'm no.
Close your eyes. It's like she's in the chair.
I was trying to channel her for you all.
You did it.
I'm no Rich Little, but I thought maybe I'd give you a little Ethel Merman there. So kid, you ever see? You got to do the head bobble.
Got a bobble.
Yeah, you ever do a Broadway show? And I was like, no, Miss Merman, I've never seen a Broadway show. So she said, where's your mother? So I said, she's up in the stands. So we went into the audience, and she treated me to my first Broadway show. And I went to see Shenandoah, which one of the boys that was actually in the pilot was in at the time. And so I chose to see Shenandoah.
I got excited. I thought you were going to say Shannon Doherty, but Shenandoah is just as exciting.
Well, we became friends, Shannon Doherty and I, later on in life. But
Do you still have the ticket stub? I mean, did they even have ticket stubs?
You know,
you didn't know to keep that. Why would you know to keep that?
First of all, I probably did not keep it. But secondly, my home burned to the ground in 2008.
Oh,
and I lost everything I ever owned. And all my memorabilia. So the back of my One Day at a Time director's chair, and my script, and a letter from Audrey Hepburn, which we'll get to when we start talking about They All Laughed.
Man.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Broadway, how did you land? How old were you? Your first Broadway show was Golda, correct? With Anne Bancroft.
With Anne Bancroft, yeah.
How old? How did you get it?
So just to back up just a moment with that. So I met a theatrical manager in New York named Muriel Carl, and she would sit there smoking all this, like, some chain smoking her cigarettes on 8th Avenue, 888 8th Avenue. It was that. So it was as funny as you can get. It was a Woody Allen film, basically.
Joey's agent from Friends, if you remember her.
Yes, yeah. This was Muriel Carl. She was very famous back in the day. I'm sure there are some people out there that went, "Oh yeah, right, Muriel Carl." So we met her, and basically she said, "What's your middle name, kid?" And I said, "Christopher." And she said, "From now on, you're Glenn Christopher." And I said, "Why?" You're too ethnic. You never work. You're too ethnic. Scarpelli's too ethnic." And I said to her, "What about Sinatra?" And she looked at me like this little precocious asshole and said, "All right, I'll give you that. We'll try it, but I don't think it's going to work." Well, I went on my first audition, which was for Mama Celeste frozen pizza commercial, and I got the part. And then I did Prego Italian sauce, and I got the part. But her point was still that, well, those are Italian rolls. But then I auditioned for Menachem Meir, son of Golda Meir, in the Broadway show Golda, starring Anne Bancroft. And I got that part too. So Annie and I were the only two WAPs in the play. So we actually had a very unique relationship. We got very, very close. And working with Anne Bancroft was like one of the joys of my life, truly.
Did you know who she was?
Absolutely.
Could you grasp the concept of her? I mean, you're so young. How old is this?
I was 9 going on 10. So what I was saying in the beginning was I loved the history of film. So I saw a lot of films. I loved MGM musicals. Like, I was the kid who watched MGM musicals at 5 years old, at 6 years old. I would love Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland and Van Johnson and all these incredible people.
Van Johnson guest starred on One Day at a Time.
And was my favorite guest star. When people ask me, who is your favorite guest star on One Day at a Time? I say without hesitation, Van Johnson. And I say that because I just loved him so much on the MGM musicals.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So Annie, I knew. I was very familiar with her work. So my dad, we were talking about my dad being a creative. My dad took me to see a lot of movies I probably shouldn't have seen, but he always wanted to teach me. And this was one of the things Dad said about film. He would say, if you could think it, you could put it on the screen. So he would teach me and show me like Planet of the Apes. I saw it when I was pretty young. Like most kids my age didn't see Planet of the Apes because it was a little scary. But I was never scared by it because he showed me how it's make-believe, but you could play any kind of part and you could wear any kind of makeup and you could create any kind of set and you could do any kind of special effect. So he really gave me a sense of what filmmaking was, what that whole idea of make-believe can be put into some sort of illustrated reality.
And you must have loved Broadway enough to continue it. I mean, from Golda to Shakespeare. I mean, I would have... How did you even... Shakespeare, right? Richard III, right?
Yes. Well, the answer is I didn't know.
Okay.
Let me share the audition.
I was going to say, how do you not know yet audition?
Right. So I auditioned 3 times, and then they said, you're going to come back with a handful to meet Al Pacino. So I got to like the 4th callback, not knowing what the heck I was reading really at that point. So I sit with Al, I read the scene with Pacino, who I'm just in awe of because look, I'm loving film already. I'm an Italian New Yorker. So The Godfather was one of my favorite movies of all time.
Assuming your dad showed you Godfather. Planet of the Apes, he better have shown you The Godfather.
Oh no, I saw The Godfather. I saw The Godfather for sure. And I think I was mature enough to really just handle it because I really just love the industry so much. So it came from a different place than how most kids would watch a film, So The Godfather was one of my favorites. So Pacino was like, a god to me. So I was a little nervous, but I had worked with Anne Bancroft. I'd worked with Ethel Merman. I had normalized people.
You're a veteran by double digits. Like you're an old school veteran by now.
Right. I had respect for him and I was nervous, don't get me wrong, but I also had normalized what people were. They were people doing a job called acting. So I didn't put people on pedestals is my point.
Interesting.
So I do this scene with him in this little rehearsal hall in Soho, in Manhattan. It's snowing like crazy, like a blizzard. He's got this hat on. He's all greasy, like he didn't look like he showered. And he walks me out to the waiting room and he just says to all the people out there, all the moms, who belongs to this one? And my mother said, me. He goes, well, I'd like to take him downstairs and bring him for a Coke. I'm going to have a cup of coffee. And I just want to explain the play to him. And she's like, okay, I mean, Al Pacino's taking my kid. Go ahead. I don't really care. So we went downstairs and he said, so basically, like, do you know what this is about? And I said, I don't have a clue. And he said, well, I'm your uncle and you're in line for the throne and I want the throne really bad. So I have to kill you to become king. And I went, oh. And then he goes, so this line means this. And we would go, and I would say, well, what does this line mean? He goes, well, you're really kind of just teasing with me because I'm up to something. And I was like, all these light bulbs were going off in my head like, oh, my goodness. I get that. Oh, I get that. So he said, let's go back up and read again. So we went back up and the producers, the director were there. And we read, and then he said, thank you. And I walked out like any other audition. And I was good at that point by just letting it go because with auditions, they're a dime a dozen, you know what I mean? So you audition, you let it go. If you don't hear anything, it's usually bad news. If show business, it's not like, no news is good news. No news is usually bad news in show business. So we, back in those days, it was, landlines only. And we got back home to Staten Island, which took a while because it was snowing and the phone was ringing. And it was Muriel Carl saying I got the part. So by the time I got home, I booked the part. They booked me that day. And it was just one of the joys of my life to work with Al Pacino, truly.
And, he was at a stage in his career where he could have very easily said to everyone involved, find someone who knows what's happening, professional. I don't have time to explain to a kid what Shakespeare is or how.
Sure.
He took the time to do that. I mean, what a generous actor.
Yeah. And truly, I agree that he was very generous. I think he saw something in me that he was like, I think this, if I just explain a little bit, we could tweak this. I don't think I was that far off or as far off as I thought I was. And having said that, there were a few things, if I may share a couple Al Pacino stories.
No. No, we're good. We're good. I'd rather talk about Love Boat. Go.
Okay, hurry.
I'm kidding. Go.
Gavin MacLeod.
I actually do.
No.
Actually, when I said that, I was like, wait, why would I make
Yeah, exactly. Because he's fantastic. I have a few Gavin MacLeod stories too, but Pacino. A couple things. First of all, he was very into energy. So when he would walk on stage to do the show, he would kind of just touch people silently. He didn't talk before he went on as Richard, but he would like just kind of touch people. And he would always, my dressing room was right next to his because he didn't take the big star dressing room. He gave that to the ladies of the show. He took this little dressing room on the second floor next to mine because he was so understated. It was really about the work with him. He's an artist. He wasn't just this famous guy. He didn't care about fame, honestly, at all. Very understated. And so he would touch these, and kind of just get a sense of energy before he went on. And right before we opened on Broadway, he said, "Would you do me a favor?" And I said, "Whatever, of course." He said, "Will you wait in the wings and be the last person that I touch before I go on stage?" And I think it was the innocence of a child because I didn't have baggage yet. So I think that he, just wanted this clear kind of vessel that a child brings to feel that right before he stepped on stage. And I remember opening night, I was waiting in the wings for him to come down, and he's there and he just puts his arm on me, closes his eyes, the house lights went down, and then he walks out on stage. "Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by the son of York." And I was just thinking, I'm getting chills talking about it because that was a moment. Al Pacino is about to open on Broadway in Richard III, and he and I are going to have this moment. And I'm like, remember this. Even at that age, at 12 years old, I was like, remember this. And I do, and it was really one of those special moments that, like I said, I still get chills talking about it.
How could you not?
Yeah, very special.
And to have this be the foundation of your career, the foundation of your talent. I mean,
very, very blessed. Really.
Wow.
And I know that.
And you made a transition from Broadway to, well, you had already done the film, I know, but you did a couple more films.
I did a film called Nunzio. Yeah, wow.
Teresa Saldana. I had dinner with her once.
Did you?
She had a interesting life.
Yes.
Attacked by a stalker.
Yes. No. It was really trippy.
Oh my god.
That was very tough for Teresa. Tova Feldshuh was in that movie.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So that was a great film. That was in Brooklyn. But then I got They All Laughed.
Well, wait. Didn't you do one with Paul Simon?
Oh, yes. I forgot.
Another legend on your resume there.
Yes.
First of all, I don't even know how many people know Paul Simon ever acted in a movie.
That he did a movie. He actually wrote it.
Wrote it and directed it.
He didn't direct it. No, he didn't direct it. But he starred in it. He wrote it and starred in it. One Trick Pony was the name of the film. And what's interesting about One Trick Pony, the lesson I learned about One Trick Pony is you don't really talk too much about what you're doing until you actually see it for yourself. Because I worked 5 weeks on that film, and I'm in it for 13 seconds. And the whole opening that was on the page was so fabulous. It went back in his childhood. I played him as a child in the 50s. And I'm singing in a bathroom, a cappella, doo-wop, Teenager in Love was the song. And we actually went in and recorded it. And I sang the lead, and he actually sang the 3-part harmony behind me in the studio. So I went into the recording studio with Paul Simon. This was an amazing event in my life. And I always loved Simon and Garfunkel. Again, I was a fan of music, and they were so amazing. So, but I went to see the film once it opened, and I'm in it for 13 seconds. So that was a big lesson. You got to learn your showbiz lessons.
100%.
You learn the hard way sometimes, but I learned never talk too much about a project until you've watched it back, because there really is a thing called the cutting room floor.
Uh-huh. I was in a movie with Lisa Kudrow and Christina Ricci called The Opposite of Sex. I had a monologue. I got my SAG card. My hometown paper put me on the cover of their arts and entertainment section. Midwest boy makes good and hot,
Right.
that whole thing.
Yeah.
And the director, Don Reeves, called me about a week before it came out and was like, I'm so sorry. I had to cut your entire scene.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So that's my...
No, it happens.
happens.
No, it totally happens. But again, you live and learn.
You live and learn.
You live and learn. So now I know, you don't talk about it, because everybody always wonders, like, oh, don't you mention, like, a lot of people don't mention the auditions they're going on. Or it's because mostly you don't get auditions. So you don't tell everyone what you're doing, because mostly there's nothing to talk about. Nothing to talk about.
True. It's so true.
It's true.
Well, I'll tell you what you didn't get cut out of. Peter Bogdanovich's They All Laugh. I mean, it's one of those movies. First of all, I think it could only have come out in 1980. It's just, I don't want to say a simple storyline, but just relationships in New York in the 80s, Like now every movie has to have such a message and a plight. And what a fun movie. I actually saw it years and years ago because I was really obsessed with John Ritter for a while. But it stars Audrey Hepburn. I mean, you're her son in that. How did you get that movie?
So I auditioned for the film, and then eventually I got to read for Peter. He was the only one there at my final audition, I believe. It was his choice. So meeting Peter was extremely exciting to me. Paper Moon was one of my favorite films growing up. I love that movie. What's Up, Doc? Another one of my favorites. So I was very familiar with Peter's work. I knew what it was. It was a big deal to work with him and for him. And then the first day we all got on the set, I met John Ritter. And even though we didn't have scenes together, there was only one scene, because it was two storylines, basically. And there was one scene when Audrey and I walked past him and Colleen Camp and Dorothy Stratton on Fifth Avenue. And that was the only scene we actually had a day. But there was about a week or two of rehearsals prior to starting. So that's when I got to know John. In fact, one point he left a message on my machine that I wish I kept. I did have him up until my fire. I used to save, because back in those days, everything was on audio tapes. Yeah, so I was able to save the stuff. Hey, this is John Scarpelli looking for Glenn Ritter. And that was how he started the message. And I'll never forget it, and I don't have it anymore. That is that's one of those irreplaceable things. But anyway.
Well, it lives on this show now.
There you go. I told the story. I told the story.
I love that.
Yeah, I love it too. He was just such a wonderful man, so down to earth and so kind to me. Everyone was on that film. But Audrey, she and I really created a special bond. And when we wrapped on the film, she gave me a note that said, "To my only movie son," because I was the only person to ever play her son in a feature film.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, she never played a mom in a feature film. She did a TV movie with her son, Sean, who was also in They All Laughed.
That's right.
Yes. And Sean Ferrer. She was married to Mel Ferrer.
That's right.
And Sean was their son. And they did a TV movie after They All Laughed, I think. Don't quote me on that. But I believe it was. But as a feature film, I was the only person to ever play her son. So the note started, "To my only movie son." And that too burnt in my fire. So the day I was watching my home burn, I was literally on my curb across the street thinking, I'm going to lose my Audrey Hepburn. I'm going to lose my John Ritter. I'm going to lose... Al Pacino gave me his costume when we wrapped on the show from Richard III. I'm going to lose my Al Pacino costume. Yeah. So I had all these treasures, as far as I was concerned, treasures in my belongings that I no longer have. But, that's for another conversation. Attachments are, we hold the memories in our heart, and that's what we do. That's what I've recognized.
We do.
Yeah.
Did you have a preference to being on stage versus running around the streets of New York with Audrey and being directed by Peter Bogdanovich? I mean, two completely different realms of work, stage and film. A preference?
Preference theater. Yeah, because they always say theater is the actor's medium, film is the director's medium, and television is the writer's medium. So for an actor, I'm most fulfilled with that audience when there's nothing between you and them, and it's like jumping into the void and, just going for it. And that experience between an actor and an audience is really very special. And you don't have that in film. Having said that, working for 6 weeks with Audrey Hepburn and Peter Bogdanovich was pretty damn good.
Yeah. And for people who don't know this, Dorothy Stratton, who, of course, starred in it, was Peter's girlfriend at the time, right?
Yeah.
And she was tragically killed by her ex-husband or ex. And I know that completely just deterred the film from, well, first of all, coming out. I think it got shelved and Peter had to use his own money to get it released. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
What a damper.
There was a dark shadow put over this light film. You know, it was done in the genre and energy and tone of a foreign film. The first 20 minutes, maybe, there's no dialogue. It's just set up with visuals, and Peter did that on purpose. So, you know, it had a very artsy quality to it, but it was a light, fair, romantic comedy, in some ways dark comedy, but comedy. And, you know, Dorothy's murder was certainly a dark cloud over They All Laughed. I learned by seeing it on the front of a newspaper 3 weeks after we wrapped. That's all it was. She died 3 weeks after we wrapped on that film. And I had seen the love affair blossom between Peter and Dorothy. We brought Peter out to the Sedona International Film Festival a couple of years ago, and we screened the film, and I moderated the Q&A. And we talked about this because I was one of the witnesses to the palpable love that those two shared. Like it was like one of those they finally found each other kind of thing. And she was still technically married at the time, and she went back to get her divorce. She knew she was going to leave him. And when she went to go talk to him, he raped her and murdered her and then killed himself. So it was hard, you know, it was really hard. Peter couldn't watch the film, stopped editing for a while. And then he did this beautiful montage at the end that he showed me. We went in to do looping here in Burbank, actually. And he said, I want to show you the last reel of the film. I'm like, oh, God, I love that. And we watched it, and he was crying just to watch it because it really is an homage to Dorothy. She would have been a huge star. I mean, she was so beautiful. Oh, my God, the first time I saw Dorothy Stratton in person, that one I didn't know. I had never seen her. You know,
You weren't looking at her Playboys?
I was not looking at her Playboys. I might have seen a lot of movies that I wasn't supposed to see, but I wasn't actually given the whole Playboy key.
Yeah.
So I did not know Dorothy Stratton. Having said that, she was absolutely gorgeous. I mean, stunning and charismatic and like that Audrey Hepburn type of star quality. So there was such a great future there for her. And and she was really lovely and sweet to me. But I find myself so honored to have been on the inside of actually witnessing, you know, their love affair.
How did you go from New York to Hollywood? How did the Scarpellis move out, and how did that happen?
Well, one day at a time brought me.
So it was what?
I had booked it.
3-2-1 Contact.
3-2-1 Contact was in New York.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah. So that was my last.
That was your first TV gig. Is that fair to say? I mean, for
regular
series.
series. Yeah, 3-2-1 Contact, the Bloodhound Gang.
I mean, you could literally, Glenn, remove everything else from your resume.
Okay.
And the blood. I mean, that's iconic in itself. 3-2-1. Anyone's generation who watched 3-2-1 Contact. I mean, come on.
That was fun, I must say.
Was it fun or was it work or a little bit of both?
No, I never thought I worked. They always say
this is always just fun. You're getting paid to do what you love.
I never even asked how much I got paid ever. Like I never thought about it. Like it was never. I never did it for the money. I'm a kid who loves this passion, and like I won the lottery. Like I actually got to do what I was hoping to do with my life, you know. And it started boogieing, so obviously I was in the right zone.
And One Day at a Time had already been out. It had been on for a while.
I was a huge fan.
You kind of, for all intents and purposes, were sort of a replacement for that character-ish. I mean, for the storyline, I should say.
Correct.
How that
Mackenzie and I talk about that too. I feel like because she and I are so spiritually connected, that I was holding a place for her.
I love that.
And that's why there was never any kind of jealousy or anything between us. Like it wasn't, they didn't bring on another girl. They brought on a little boy, and I held a place for her. And when she came back, I thought I was going to be fired. And they were like, no, we want both of you. So we became lifelong friends. But let's back up for a second, because we were talking about 3-2-1 Contact.
Yeah, and I did kind of jump. I was wondering, okay, so...
So I'm doing 3-2-1 Contact, and we're on hiatus for that. And I think it's going to be picked up for a second season, which it was. I didn't do it because I booked One Day at a Time. So this was during, let me actually share with you how I got One Day at a Time. So I had met Valerie Bertinelli on another pilot that I was doing called Jump Street for NBC. And I did this with Scott Columbia, who was her boyfriend at the time, who was also on One Day at a Time. And Scott and I became buddies. And on the set of that show, they said, the producers came to my parents and said, would it be okay if Glenn and Scott hang out because of the chemistry between them is such an important part of this, and we just want them to get to know each other. And Scott said, yeah, my girlfriend and I could come pick him up for dinner, and we'll go out to dinner. And my parents were like, of course, absolutely. So they came by. He didn't tell me he was dating Valerie Bertinelli. And then he walked in my hotel room with Valerie freaking Bertinelli, and she was such a huge star on One Day at a Time, and I loved the show. I loved all the Norman Lear shows. So very young. I watched them all. Maude, I loved them all. The Jeffersons, I watched them all. So Valerie was like a big deal to me, as she was to most people at that point, and she walked in, and I was like, oh my gosh, you didn't tell me you were dating Valerie Bertinelli. He goes, yeah, that's my girlfriend. So we hung out, we went out to dinner. They then went to New York shortly after I was doing Richard III, and they called and said, hey, listen, we got tickets to come see Richard III. We want to see it. So I asked Al if I could introduce Valerie and Scott to him. I very rarely did that. It was not his thing to do, like meeting people and stuff. But I did this because I thought it was cool at 12 years old to introduce Valerie Bertinelli to Al Pacino. I'm like, how fun is that? So I'm like, Val. So he said yes. He had not seen the show. He didn't even own a TV, I don't think, at that point. And he was like, I don't know who your friend is, but I'd be happy to meet them. So I introduced them. Her leg was shaking, and they had a lovely conversation. And as we're walking out of the Court Theater on 48th Street, West 48th Street, New York, Valerie says to me, Glenn, if there's anything I could ever do for you, you just let me know. And I was like, okay. Valerie Bertinelli owes me one. That can't be a bad thing. But I just loved her so much. So cut to now, a couple of years later, my mom is reading TV Guide in the backyard of our Staten Island home. And she says, hey, there's this article that they're bringing a 14-year-old boy to replace Mackenzie Phillips on One Day at a Time. And I went, oh my gosh, let's call Valerie. So yeah, my agent tracked her down on a TV movie in San Francisco that she was shooting. And she went, oh my gosh, yes, Glenn, I will definitely recommend him. Bonnie and I were talking today, and Bonnie, who had casting approval, said she wanted to find someone with theater credits. And she said, I saw him on Broadway with Al Pacino. She goes, I'm definitely recommending him. So it was during the actor strike of 1980. The president of the company and the casting director flew to New York just to meet me. It was like one of those casual, they're not allowed to really cast, but it was a casual meet and greet. And we connected. I think I did read, but I don't want to say that out loud. But I think I read something, if I recall.
I don't think the 1980 police are going to come after
you. No,
I think you're fine.
I don't want to get them in trouble.
Fran Drescher is going to be knocking in like 3 minutes. Get out. My Fran and your Ethel Merman, we'll take it on the road.
We should take it on the road. Ethel and Fran together again. Hey, Fran. I love it. So it was during the actor strike, so I just did that, and it was at the Plaza Hotel in New York. And then I started high school that year. That was my freshman year in high school. So I just let it go like I do every other audition. And come October, I was going to school, professional children's school on West 60th Street in New York. That's where I went to school, which was made for actors, where you can go get a gig and you're on a correspondence course immediately. So it was made for child actors. And I come home from school one day, and Mom's packing her bags, and I think she's leaving Dad. I'm like, oh, what's going on? And she said, hurry, pack. They're putting us on a flight tonight. They want to see you tomorrow for One Day at a Time. And I was like, oh my gosh. So literally we did a red eye. I went straight to the audition. It was Bonnie. It was Valerie. I don't think Pat was there for that one, but the producers, our director, Alan Rafkin, a camera just like this so that Norman Lear could also see his and give his approval. The network was there. It was a big deal. Like, this was like one of the final auditions. And I read, and we waited in the hotel room that night, and I got the phone call that I got the part. So that was on a Wednesday. I auditioned on Thursday. I went to see a taping of the show Friday because they said, why don't you come and sit in the audience and get to meet everybody? And that was the first time I met Harrington. And then Monday morning I was on the set and I never looked back. My whole life literally turned on a dime. So my advice always to people in show business is, hey, never give up before the miracle, because you are one phone call away from your life changing. And that's just the truth. That's the truth about show business.
And that miracle turned into 3 seasons.
3 seasons, yeah.
3 seasons of just brilliant writing, brilliant acting. You know, I talked about this with Carol Burnett, actually, about just television back then. You know, her sketches would have these moments where the characters would have sometimes up to 2 minutes without a laugh. And then the laugh would hit.
Right.
You know, now it's joke. Right. The acting on that show, the character development, the scenes between you and Bonnie Franklin, I mean, that's up there with probably what you and Al Pacino did. I obviously didn't see that show, but I imagine that I don't think it could have been better. I mean, you two, there are just some scenes. Anne Romano's anger. I mean, you talk about like...
She was feisty.
Just brilliant. I feel like she probably wasn't in real life, because someone who's that good, you can tell like, oh, they're getting to do something they normally maybe don't. Like, she just seemed like she was such a sweet woman.
Yeah. So Bonnie was one of my favorite people in the world. We stayed close till the day she died. I went to visit her. You know, she died of pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
So I just love Bond so much. And one of the shows that really, because I got very embedded in the show quickly. The first season, Bonnie Franklin's had a boyfriend and I played his son. So she was kind of coming in as the stepmom that I resented. But that was where we got to do all the gritty stuff. And that's where Bond and I discovered our chemistry, really. And there was one show where she slaps me in the show, and she really slapped me. Yeah. And she said, are we going to really do this? I said, absolutely. So that really happened. And I asked Patricia Palmer, our producer, if they sweetened the actual slap. And they said, no, that was the actual sound. Because if you watch it, it's intense.
It is very intense.
But I really wanted to go there. We really needed to go there for the scene. The work came first on One Day at a Time. Let me just say that. It wasn't like you were saying, the laughs. Like, it was really about the arcs of the characters. It was about the development of the characters. Norman Lear set such a precedent in those ways to make these people meaningful and dimensional and true to life, and to really be a reflection on what was going on in our society. I mean, he changed television.
How hands-on was he at this stage in his career and on this stage with One Day at a Time?
He was chairman of the board, but he wasn't the showrunner any longer.
Okay.
But he had a lot of say. One time, I remember he was obviously watching a feed of some sort of run-through or something, and he said, I think Glenn needs a haircut. So he was interested enough, let's just put it that way, that I needed a haircut, which I did. He was always right.
I was going to say, he knew what he was doing. If he told you to do something, I'd imagine you would just do it.
I guess Norman Lear knew what he was doing. And one of my favorite people in the world also. But Bond really, once Norman became chairman of the board, Bond ran the show in a lot of ways, even though we did have showrunners who were wonderful, Dick Bensfield and Perry Grant. Bond ran the show because she and the cast were there prior to anybody else. So it was Norman and the cast that started the show. And then, so she really took the lead in keeping the this caliber up, if you will. So this one show where she slaps me, where I get really pissy and I break a plant that she gave my dad, and she goes ahead and slaps me. There was so much pathos in that show that we really got a chance to see Alex as this vulnerable, hurt, pain child that we hadn't seen before. Because sometimes he would come off a little bratty, but you know, there's pain behind things. And we got to see that he was hurting because his parents were, you know, heading towards a divorce, and he resented Anne Romano. Now, the arc of that character shifted so much by season 2 because they actually took the character of my dad off the show. because one of the things that occurs on One Day at a Time was it's about a single woman raising kids. So as soon as she had any type of boyfriend, the audiences didn't relate to that so much because it changed the dynamic of the show. So Ron Rifkin, who's a wonderful actor who we loved so much and missed so much on that show, was not on my second season, which was the 7th season. And then I got to move in with them. So season 2 started with a show called Alex Moves In. And, that was my lucky day as far as I was concerned.
And you were filming in Universal Studios, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And had you been to Hollywood before?
Well, I did the pilot.
You did looping for...
I did looping for They All Laughed. I did the pilot that I met Valerie on. So yeah, and I had made some trips out here. So I'd been on the Universal Studios tour. And now in my contract it says I have to wave to the trams because that's part of anybody that works on the lot has to be able to be friendly to the trams. So I was friendly to those trams. So it was really exciting to be on the other side of it, I must admit. And, I went to backlot school. Everyone always asks how to go to school. I went to backlot school at Universal for the years that I was on One Day at a Time once we moved there. And Kim Fields was there and Nancy McKeon, who are still 2 close friends, Mindy Cohn, Todd Bridges, who I'm still close with, Gary Coleman, of course, and Dana Plato, who are gone now. But those were all my friends. That was my school. Like, we all had our own classrooms, but we had these doors that would open up so we could all also be together. So I did have a social aspect with kids. Jason Bateman and Ricky Schroeder were on Silver Spoons at the time, so they were in school with us. So, yeah, it was pretty cool. I look back and I'm just so grateful that I had such a good experience as a child.
It's so funny because, we're talking about all these people, like these big names, right? These like legendary people you're working with. Can't forget, you're what on One Day at a Time? 13, 12,
14.
You're a child.
I was a freshman in high school when I got the part.
You're talking about, these, when you just said that, like, you were going to school at Universal with the Facts of Life cast and all these, it reminded me, like, you were a child and watching One Day at a Time, you had such swagger. I love your physical movements.
Yeah.
You had this, like, you're this Italian, like, it's almost like you're this wise soul that's been around for years and years and years and years.
Oh, thank you, dude.
Yeah, we just forget that you were a child at the end of the day.
Right.
Did you feel like an adult working on One Day at a Time? Did you feel like you hung with Pat and Bonnie, or was it the children have to be separated? The children have to be, the minors, I should say, the non-18-year-olds. They gotta be separated. Or was it just everyone's always together?
No, I knew I was doing a job adults mostly do. So I had that sense of awareness of the responsibilities that I had. But then we also had a chance to be kids, So I'll tell you two things that answer your question. First of all, on our show, they allowed the cast to play a role with the writers to give notes. So we would do, Monday morning, we would have a reading of the script, and then we would take lunch, and then we'd sit down page by page and give notes for all of us to play this role in this creative powwow that made One Day at a Time. And, I would be quiet in these places because I'm 14. And I'm on this hit show that I used to watch, and it's just this miracle that happened in my life. So, I was pretty quiet. I didn't, and Bond pulled me aside one time and said, "Hey, listen, during our note session, you don't talk." And I said, "Oh, should I?" And she said, "Yes." She goes, "We don't know what it's like to be a 14-year-old boy. These old farts are writing for you. Like, you have to speak up and say, I don't know what it is about this, but this isn't how I would normally say this. Or do you think Alex would really do this? I don't know if Alex would really do this." Like, we're open to that. So she actually gave me a little tutorial on how to give notes. And she learned that from Norman, which was just remarkable because they had an issue on season 1 where she didn't like a script. And he said, "Well, what don't you like?" She goes, "Well, I just don't like it." He goes, "That's not a note because I don't know what to make of. I just don't like it." What don't you like about it? Help me out, and we could work it. We could find the resolve on this. So, did I have a adult perspective, and was I treated as an adult? Absolutely. And I think that was a humongous teaching moment for me, to learn how to express myself and to really look at Alex as this well-rounded character that I had some say on what direction he went. So Bonnie invited me to spend a weekend at her house one time, and because her stepkids that were coming into her life were my age, and we got along so good, so she said, come on by. And Julie, who was her stepdaughter, who she wouldn't call her step anymore, she goes, she's my daughter. So Julie and I are still dearest of friends. And Julie said there was one time, she said this to me recently, she says there was one time when we woke up and you were playing in the pool with my brother Jed, and then you were talking to me about high school things, and then you went and had coffee with Bonnie and her manager Marilyn and discussed next week's script. So I think the answer to your question is I found a way to be all of those things, because I think a part of me was always all of those things. I could relate to adults really well, and as a child actor, I think you have to. And then I also was able to play in the pool and talk about stuff for high school. And so being an actor, I think, is a chameleon kind of position in life. And I think I found my inner chameleon.
Well, I love your hindsight on being so grateful of being a child actor. I mean, there's such an awful discourse right now going on about child actors.
Right.
And there's a conversation about, because of the documentary that's out, the Quiet on the Set.
Yeah.
I actually worked on all that. All that was my very first television gig. But I was 18. So I work with all the adults. I was separated. I didn't see any of that stuff on all that. I hated working on the show because I thought the show was awful. And I was too cool at 18 to be like working with these like kids doing this awful, like I couldn't even get through the documentary because the show is so bad.
Wow.
I mean, we were told, don't look at the stars of the show. Like, do not.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Like, that's the only bad stuff that happened with me there. But I was like you. We were shooting on Paramount, at the Paramount lot and at the Earl Carroll Theater on Sunset. I just wanted to be where old Hollywood was. So, I was, walking around the Paramount lot just being, I can't believe I'm on the Paramount lot. I couldn't care less what was happening on all that.
Right.
I couldn't care less. But, so lucky, I never witnessed any of that. And it sounds like you had a very, wonderful child actor experience.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'll say a couple of things in response to that. So I did watch the documentary.
You did? Okay.
Yeah. And all I could think about while we were watching it is just, thank you, Norman Lear, for being that person who set the tone for the entire business. His company had such a stature and did everything so by the book. There are laws to protect children in Hollywood that seem to not have been applied at Nickelodeon at that time, from this documentary anyway, where Norman set a place, a tone for the whole company that was clean, clear, elegant. I felt so protected. I was so protected. Thank you, Norman Lear. Thank you, Bonnie Franklin. Thank you, Pat Harrington. Thank you to my parents. My studio teacher, Gladys Hirsch, who just passed away last year. We were friends till the day she passed away at 96 years old. That's how close we were all my life. She was like a second mom to me, really. So I was really very protected. I talked about this with Kim and Nancy recently, that we all won the lottery. None of us felt like we were ever in harm. So I want to say something to all of that. So because, of course, people blame show business when they see that type of thing. And I just want to say, it's not just show business. That happens anywhere. That could happen in churches. That could happen in camps. That could happen on school grounds. And it does. Anywhere there are children, those children should be protected. Period. So it's not just about, of course, you're doing a TV station that's making child programming, of course you should be protecting those children.
That should be the one place where they were protected the most. Nickelodeon Studios, that should be the one place. That should be almost like a daycare. Your parents should not ever have to think twice about dropping you off.
Because some of those parents that were on that, they were naive. Like my mom, by the time we got to One Day at a Time, she was pretty savvy too, because I had done all these other incredible jobs. So you become savvy on how to protect my child and what to look out for, and whatever. But that's life. That should be any child. Like I have a lot of friends, and I was not molested. I was not, abused. I really wasn't. So, I have a lot of friends that were, and none of them are in show business. So you have to really look at children should just be protected, period. And I have a lot of parents that come to me and say, should I get my kid in the business? And my first answer is, does your child love it? That's number one, because it's really hard. It's a really hard business. You give up a lot of other things, like I was in Little League. I couldn't do Little League anymore, but that wasn't my passion. I mean, I liked Little League, but it wasn't like my passion was being on stage. So I just knew it. And you have to have a really tough skin as an actor in general, especially as a child actor, because, you don't get things. You get rejected a lot, like a lot. And you just have to be okay and believe in yourself. Like my mom was always like, their loss. That was her line all the time. Their loss. And I just believed that. It was their loss. Not meant to be.
You have these adults just doing the right thing and taking care of these actors. And it almost sounds like this community of theater,
Yes. And it really was.
In each episode, when you watch One Day at a Time, it's almost like you're watching a play. Mm-hmm. It just feels like theater with, there's cameras, but...
we would do a 5:30 show and an 8 o'clock show, and they would just put them together, the best of both. So there were times when I would watch the show where we stumbled. Like nowadays, everything's a little too clean for me. Like even how they approach sitcoms. Like it's okay if an actor stumbles a little bit. It gives you that live feeling. I mean, what would the Carol Burnett show be if everything was clean? Please. It wouldn't be the show it was. Even Saturday Night Live. So Norman really made it his business. That's why they wanted a kid with theater credits to do the part. Norman cast so many of us from theater. Bonnie was in Applause. He went to see her in Applause. My friend Danielle Brisebois from All in the Family and Archie Bunker's Place was in Annie. We were friends for years and years on Broadway. And he cast Danielle. Sally Struthers. I mean, Gene Stapleton. The list goes on of the people that came from theater. And that's because the approach that Norman's shows took were organic.
And from Norman Lear to Aaron Spelling, 3 episodes of The Love Boat. Get this. First of all, I just cannot get over your age at all this, because your first episode, you played a pill popper.
Right.
And your mom on that, she was on The Golden Girls. Did you know that?
No.
Yes, she plays Catherine, who Stan marries. And here's a really bit of odd trivia. Stan and Catherine were also on The Love Boat together.
Oh my gosh.
So she did a couple episodes as well. I know.
Wow.
Stupid trivia that no one ever needs to know.
I love it.
It'll
No, I love it.
Pop up anywhere, maybe on some game show one day. But then, wait, you also did another episode with Cornell Wilde.
Yes.
Who, I mean, I love In Leave Her to Heaven with Gene Tierney. Like,
what a film.
I love that movie so much. And he was on I Love Lucy.
Yes.
Gloria DeHaven.
Gloria DeHaven. I was just going to say Gloria
I don't know if people know this. She was in Modern Times with Charlie Chaplin.
Wow.
You know that?
No.
She plays Paulette Goddard's sister in that movie.
You're kidding.
Oh, and
wow.
Yeah. I mean, again, these legends from old Hollywood that you're working with, was that lost on you?
June Allison was on one of the
Red Buttons.
And Red Buttons were on one of my episodes.
Funny.
Yes.
It's they kind of intertwined their storyline with your pill popping one.
Yes, exactly. And you mentioned my mom on the show, Eleanor Donahue, also played my mother on One Day at a Time. She is my birth mom. And the only time we see her was on an episode called Alex Moves In, where she shows up and actually gives Anne me. And it was a really beautiful episode. So I worked with Eleanor twice. She's lovely. I really love her. I love her so much.
Was that fun? Love Boat seems like such a hoot.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love Love
Right?
Boat. Yeah, Jill Whelan is one of my dearest friends. Always was. We've been besties forever and ever, and she and I are still close to this day.
That's a show you forget was on a soundstage. That, honestly, they did such a great job of making you think that was on a ship. Like, it's
Yeah.
not at all.
They did go on the ship a few times. I was never asked to be part of that. I'm just saying. Harrington went on one of the actual cruises, if I recall. But yeah, no, it was so fun. And, being the little gay boy that I was back then, totally in the closet, but I loved Dynasty. And the most exciting part about being on Love Boat is all of Aaron Spelling's folks would have lunch together in the commissary, and there was the entire cast of Dynasty sitting there.
You wouldn't believe
Colby's.
You wouldn't believe who's at the top of my dream list to be on this show. You would not believe if I told you who was up there.
Tell me.
Heather Locklear.
Heather.
And she was in your episode.
She was.
I don't know what it is. I love Heather Locklear.
I love Heather. I love Heather Locklear too. I was very dear friends with Scott Baio growing up.
Okay.
And our dads were very close friends. And she and Scott dated for a while. So like literally the week I did Love Boat with her was Easter week. And then we all had Easter at the Baio's house. Rose Baio cooked us all a beautiful Easter dinner. And she was there for that too. So we became kind of buddies.
When you say you're a little gay boy,
Yes.
you're closeted
Totally.
and hiding it from everyone, hiding it from co-stars as well. Like, anyone know? Nobody.
Nobody.
And you're playing these roles.
But I knew, some people say, oh, you might, you discover. No, I knew early.
Was it intimidating or scary when you get cast as, you have to go on Love Boat and woo Jill and Karen Copens from Once Bitten in
Yes,
Beverly Hills.
That's right. In one of my episodes, I'm an actor, so I just chalked it all up to acting because I became a pretty good actor in my own personal life too, and that was my struggle. So everybody has their dark cloud. Mine was I was in an industry that I had quite a microscope on me, and I couldn't be my authentic self. So. A lot of people always wondered whatever happened to me. Like a lot of people were like, you were doing so much and all of a sudden you weren't doing anything.
Well, after One at a Time, you got directed by Martin Scorsese.
Right. I did one other short series in between two, actually. One was Fantasy on NBC Daytime with Peter Marshall and Leslie Uggams, which I carry those lessons to this day because I host so many things on my own station that I learned so much about hosting from Peter Marshall and from Leslie. And they're still two of my dearest friends. Peter's 98 right now and is doing fantastic. So that's exciting. And Leslie's fantastic. And then I did Jennifer Slept Here with Ann Jillian and Georgia Engel.
Yes.
Which was so exciting. That was wonderful, wonderful. So I moved from CBS to NBC. I had a development deal at NBC because we knew One Day at a Time was ending. I didn't do the final season of One Day at a Time because we knew it was going to be the end, and I had this opportunity to start all this other stuff. So that's the quick story there. But then I did work with Martin Scorsese, who's a dear friend. His family, his oldest daughter, Kathy, is one of my besties. I'm godfather to her child. So, yes, so I love them all very much.
You directed an episode of
Amazing Stories.
Yes, Steven Spielberg's Amazing Stories.
Correct.
I mean,
so I was on that show, and I actually was talking to him on the set of doing that, saying I was becoming disillusioned with acting. Those were my exact words. And really, what that meant to me was I can't do this acting thing if I have to keep playing this role of who I am.
So it had a major play in you deciding to leave show business. Right?
I left show business. And I was being offered so many things. I had just toured in Brighton Beach Memoirs. And like all these, I was being offered a lot. I was on a lot of game shows. I did Family Feud and all these wonderful game shows. So I was being offered quite a bit. And I just decided to go. Now, my excuse to everyone was I was going to go to NYU Film School, which I did. So that's what it looked like on the surface. But the truth was I was going to New York because I just wanted to meet guys. And I just wanted to be myself. And what a wonderful place to go and to blend in with everybody else, because nobody gives a crap about anybody out there like that. It didn't have the judgment. I could just mingle in and become the normal folk and have my private life. So that's why I left acting, was to be gay. And in 1986, that's the only thing you can do. There was really no other choice unless you wanted to play the games. They just didn't want to play the games. I didn't think it was fair to some of the women that like were into me. And I was just like, oh, I wish I could just say something because I just think they're so fun. I don't want to hurt their feelings, but I'm just not, I'm gay. And I just never was able to say it out loud. So that was my transition.
And I know this is a very hard question, a loaded question, but any regrets? I mean, did you ever think?
No regrets at all. I saved my life by doing that. I don't think I would have been able to keep going living an unauthentic life. Living an authentic life means everything to me to this day. I live in Sedona, Arizona, which is a very spiritual community, because I have a very I put spirituality in my own personal path, my own self-awareness, if you will, as my number one goal of every day of my life. It's really true. Like I even wore my, what do I have? Property of Love shirt on for you all today.
I love that.
My Property of Love. Because I really feel that's the most important thing. I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual. I met someone who then died of HIV/AIDS. I was in love with him. And he died at 36. I was 25 when I buried him. And I was there till the end. I felt his last heartbeat. I was his caretaker. My entire childhood fortune went to his health care. So I was really stripped of everything. And at first I was angry with the universe, and I went on this spiritual walkabout, if you will, to find out what the heck this thing called life is all about. Like I let go of all my passions and career dreams to fall in love. I fall in love and then he's taken? Like, what? But in those days in the 80s, our community was hit hard, So that was the beginning of my awakening. And I really saw it as an opportunity to dive deep inside myself. So looking inside myself has been really my life's purpose since then. So I have all this wonderful career stuff, but I think I have it all in proper perspective these days due to some of the hardships. I had a lot of loss in my life, as people do. It's called life. It's called the human condition. And I've done so much work on self-compassion, Justin, that I feel like I've really learned how to be compassionate to others because of that. We're only as kind to others as we are to ourselves, really. So self-love, self-worthiness, self-compassion. These are the things that, I've done a lot of work on myself.
And sitting here hearing you talk like this and seeing where you are and reaching a level where most people strive to get to, finally knowing yourself, being so confident, being out, being married, having a wonderful husband, being open about it, being expressive about it. Does that make you think, oh, now I could go back into it? Now I could go back into it?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, I love what I do because I'm at I'm at a wonderful place in my life to do what I do for my own company, and I just love that. But yeah, no, I think about that. I might throw my hat back in the ring. We'll see. I did the One Day at a Time on Netflix.
That's right. And Gloria Kellett was on this show.
No kidding. I love Gloria so much. And Mike Royce.
No.
Yes. And Brent Miller and Norman, of course, working on that was just so wonderful. So I had that little dose, and being back at on the Sony lot and doing it in front of an audience, like that was fun. And that show, I just loved that version, the reimagining of One Day at a Time with the Cuban family was just so fantastic. A quick Norman story.
Of course.
So he comes on the set, and I walked up to him. It was right before a run through at Sony, and he just grabbed my face and he said, "Oh, you're so easy to love." And I said, "Norman, I can't thank you enough. Oh my gosh, you're just so wonderful, and having me here is so great." He goes, "Kid, I'm sure you're saying some really nice things, but I left my hearing aid at home and I can't hear a fucking word." So that's Norman Lear at his finest.
I would have been so mad if you left this show and not told me that. I would have been very, very, very mad. And if you think you're leaving the show without talking about your pop music career, you're not. You're not. As if being on Broadway and being on film and TV wasn't enough, you threw your hat into the pop world.
So I've always loved singing. So I had this opportunity. Once I got on One Day at a Time, I had an opportunity to sign a deal for a record deal. And the two best things that came out of doing that album was I got to be on American Bandstand with Dick Clark, which was a dream of dreams.
And can be seen on YouTube.
Yeah, there you go. And I got to get my own float at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, which for a New Yorker, a little kid New Yorker, that was unbelievable, a dream come true. And the night before Thanksgiving, you rehearse in Herald Square. And the first time I actually heard my album being played loud in Herald Square, I was like, I was almost brought to tears. Like, that's how, it was such a big deal for me. So I had both of those experiences. Oh, and I sang at the White House, too, for President Bush, the first President Bush, yes. I sang at the White House for the Easter egg roll on the front lawn of the White House. Me and Eddie Rabbitt were the two guests that year.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had some fun experiences singing, too, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because I forget that sometimes. Yeah.
Well, we have sadly reached the end of my show, and I love to end my show with a very, very simple little thing. You don't even have to put any thought into this, okay? It's either or.
I never put thought into anything.
Perfect. Join the club. Ice cream or frozen yogurt?
Ice cream.
Arizona sunrises or Arizona sunset?
Sunsets.
J-Lo's music or J-Lo's movies?
Music.
Central Park or Griffith Park?
Ooh. Griffith Park.
Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune?
Will.
Elvis or Freddie Mercury?
Elvis.
Good Times or Jeffersons?
Jeffersons.
Oh, wasn't hard for you.
No.
Friends or Will and Grace?
Oh. That one's a hard one for me. I love them both, but I'll say Will and Grace.
Psychic readings or tarot readings?
Oh, psychic readings.
Madonna pop songs or Madonna ballads?
Oh. Pop.
Disney World or Universal Studios?
Well, Disney World was the first place I ever went as a kid, and it holds a very special place. Okay. But Universal Studios, my husband Johnny and I just celebrated our 1-year wedding anniversary at Universal Studios. And so it's really special now because I hadn't been on there for a very long time. So I'm going to say Universal Studios tour.
Flowers or plants?
Oh, plants.
Christian Bale or Matthew McConaughey?
Oh, McConaughey.
Deep dish or thin crust?
Thin crust. Yeah.
Joni Mitchell or Carole King? That's
That one is hard.
really hard.
I'm going to say Mitchell.
Burger King or Dairy Queen?
Oh. I don't like either.
Carol Burnett said the same thing. Well, when I said In-N-Out, I gave her 2. And she's like, neither.
We don't do fast food. No, I gave up fast food a long time ago.
Al Pacino in Scarface or Al Pacino in Son of a Woman?
Scarface.
Mamas and the Papas or the Beach Boys?
Mamas and the Papas.
I know why.
Yes.
Mustard or ketchup?
Ketchup.
Facebook or Instagram?
Oh, that one's a hard one. I don't know. I like them both in their own way. I feel they're very different. I'm going to go Facebook.
It's a Living or Alice?
Oh, gosh. That's tough because I have friends on both shows. Like Alice, and we shared the hour with Alice for many, many years. But yet, Anne Jillian, I loved her. I'm going to say Alice. Sorry, Anne.
Okay. I know the answer to this one. Dynasty or Dallas?
Dynasty.
Bowling or mini golf?
Bowling.
The Simpsons or Family Guy?
Family Guy.
Paul Newman or Marlon Brando?
Ooh. Brando.
And last but not least, Stevie Nicks or Stevie Wonder?
Wonder.
There's no right or wrong except for that one. Stevie Nicks every day, and if this was a real show, there'd be a trap door and you'd go under.
I mean, I love Stevie Nicks.
Man who doesn't.
No, I don't say I didn't.
Stevie Nicks?
I didn't say I didn't like Stevie Nicks. I love Stevie Nicks. That was Valerie's favorite, and when she got to meet him, she got to meet her because, of course, marrying Eddie Van Halen, who was also so wonderful. We didn't get a chance to talk about Ed, but I just loved Ed so much. But she eventually got to meet Stevie, and it was like one of the most exciting days of her life. I just love Stevie Wonder, and I've seen him perform, and I'm justifying my love for Stevie Wonder. Please, who has to justify their love for Stevie Wonder?
I think it just shocked me because
I shocked Justin Root. I'm kind of proud of that.
You did.
I'm kind of proud of that.
Well, it just means you have to come back and talk about more things. See if you can shock me again. I cannot thank you enough for coming on here. I really, really appreciate it. Where can everyone find you? On Instagram?
Glenn Scarpelli on Facebook, Glenn Scarpelli on Instagram. Those are the only two I really do.
Yeah, you're a joy to follow because you're so fun. And honestly, like, I think anyone who does follow you and listens to this will hear or see the exact person that they follow, because everything you say, you're true to, your love of John, your love of Arizona and just life. And you are a very fun follow. You're a fun friend. You're a fun man. I thank you. And in the tradition of the Carol Burnett Show, you're going to sign my guest book on camera.
Oh, I love it. Oh, my God. Are you going to read it aloud?
No one's ever going to see it, but it's just going to...
No one's ever going to... Yeah. I'm going to do something no one's ever going to see.